Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on returning to a safe workplace after the COVID-19 pandemic and when we come out of this situation. I'm Anna from the TUC, and shortly I'll be joined by Shelly, my colleague, and policy lead on health and safety. Before we get going, though, just a bit of housekeeping. It's fantastic to see so many of you online. We have never had such a popular webinar, and it's brilliant to see. It's great to see so many of you already introducing yourselves and telling us a bit about each other, about where you're from in the chat panel, and please continue to use that to share your tips and ideas. My colleagues Ian and Alice will also be in there pointing you towards other resources which are helpful. Our webinar today is being live captioned. If you click on the green button underneath the screen, it will open another window where you can view a live transcript. So please do that if you would like to follow what we're saying with captions. There's an ask a question button under the screen. Please post any questions there and we'll do our best to answer them. If we don't answer all of them, don't worry, because we'll use those to inform future webinars and any content we put out. If you post any employment rights questions, we've got an employment rights expert on our webinar next week, and we'll be putting those questions to her. So first, I'm going to hand over to Shelly, and she's going to give us an update on what the government have said about the return to work. So Shelly, it's over to you.
Thanks, Anna, and hi, everyone. My name's Shelly. I am the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Policy Officer at the TUC. I've been asked to kind of set the scene, as Anna said. So I'm going to start by giving a bit of an overview of what's happened, particularly over the last week, what the TUC has been calling for, and what we've been presented with by government. Now, I'm going to keep it general, as well. There's a lot of specific guidance and measures needed in certain sectors. The main part of this webinar is really to hear from our 3 workplace reps on what the situation is like in their sectors and how they're organising on health and safety. So, as you'll all know well, for many people, there hasn't been no lockdown. Instead, there's been a workplace health and safety crisis, with thousands of key workers and non-key workers continuing to attend work. Many without even the recommended safety guidance in place, many facing a colossal shortage of the required PPE, and many fearful of losing their job, their income, or even their life. It has been a national disgrace, and the government's actions and inactions have cost far too many or any working class people's lives. Where they have been able, union reps have been acting in the interest of their members in attempting to make work safer and to remove workers from harm's way. We've seen a lot of success stories from unions organising. That's ranged from negotiating from early on, improved sick pay, the furloughing of vulnerable workers, innovative measures to facilitate social distancing, advising on risk assessments, and so on. And there's been examples of union reps asserting their power to organise in the interests of colleagues' health and safety, but there are also many examples of employers refusing to accept responsibility and putting business performance ahead of the well-being of their workforce. And they do so with the knowledge that the regulators are not doing what we need them to do when it comes to enforcement. To date, not a single enforcement notice has been served by the Health and Safety Executive. And as of this week, the situation is changing, and tens of thousands more people have either returned to work already or are preparing to do so as their employers make those changes. We released a report 2.5 weeks ago setting out what we expect to be in place before there can be any lifting of a lockdown, both in terms of economic policy to support jobs and wages, as well as, crucially, health and safety. And what we've been calling for is mandatory risk assessments made publicly available and with the approval of health and safety reps. This is important because it's the health and safety reps who have the training, the knowledge of what the hazards are in their specific workplaces, and they also have the confidence of their colleagues, much more so than bosses. The ability for health and safety reps to be roving, meaning that they can advise on issues affecting workplaces where there is no union presence or recognition. We've been asking for much clearer guidance on distancing and PPE with no shortcuts. Our line is clear. Where social distancing can't happen, workers need PPE, and where PPE isn't given, you shouldn't be attending the workplace. We want attention to mental health with regards to workload. If staff are only at a 40% capacity in a workplace, they shouldn't be expected to carry out 100% of the work, and bosses need to be mindful of how much of a stressor coronavirus is. We need serious enforcement, not the current inaction that we're seeing from the HSE, and making clear our concerns about the low number of reports that have been coming in, the low level of action being taken, and the lack of confidence really that there is in enforcement in general. We want more detail on how the vulnerable will be protected, and for the involvement of the Equality and Human Rights Commission in ensuring equality duties are being met, especially on the issue of the disproportionate impact that we've been seeing on Black workers. We need more funding and more teeth for the regulators. Local authorities have been cut to the bone in the last decade, and the government's pledge of a 10% funding boost for the Health and Safety Executive doesn't even come close, particularly when its funding has been cut by 46% in that time period. We've also called for a public campaign, so like that of the stay-at-home marketing or stay alert as it now is, but let's not go there. We want to see a kind of campaign on billboards, bus stops, and so on, making workers aware of how they can report a breach, but also making bosses aware that they can be prosecuted if they ignore safety rules. Now, have our asks been taken forward? Well, you might have seen from what was released on Monday by the government that we did get some concessions in the safe working guidelines. For example, there's now a much tougher language on risk assessments and what employers must do, rather than, as it before kind of said, employers could consider doing such and such. There's an encouragement to publish risk assessments, though still not a requirement. There's a recognition that bosses need to consult with safety reps. And as I mentioned, there's extra resources for the Health and Safety Executive. But what they've provided, let's be clear, is not yet enough for us to say that it is safe to return to work. Some unions also have their own specific demands on this. For example, the 5 tests for education workers, which I'm sure Jess from the National Education Union will talk about. And we continue to push for the tough safety measures we set out in our report. And we need to continue to push for the publication of risk assessments to be a new regulatory requirement. We need to be going after those bosses who fail to do it, as well as any who may end up with HSE enforcement action against them. We need to be kind of naming and shaming them. To me, it's clear that the government's initial priorities really have been based on economic recovery before the prevention of further losses of life. And what is also clear is that, as we already knew, it is unions, and it is in particular health and safety union reps, like some of you guys, which are absolutely our first responders in the workplace when it comes to protecting our members. We may not be able to rely on the government to keep us safe, but we can rely on each other. Now, on that note, we know that care in particular is a sector where there's been huge issues in terms of protecting workers who've been going out throughout this pandemic, attending to people. There's also been huge health and safety issues as well for those who they care for. And I think it's really important that we're able to hear from those who are having to respond to that on the front line. So I'm now going to hand over to Francis, who works as a care worker and is a workplace rep for Unison.
Hi everybody, Francis. I work for a charity in health and social care, and I'm also a Unison rep. I've been asked just to chat a bit about my experience that's been happening so far. Obviously I work in Scotland, so we are still under lockdown. Thankfully the company that I work for is following the guidance. Previously the guidance was for PPE that only people who had suspected or confirmed cases of COVID got PPE, which thankfully has now changed, and the staff and the personal assistants, the carers that are on the front line, are getting to choose for themselves, and they get to kind of risk assess it themselves to see whether they require PPE, and that's including travelling to and from work, which is a huge step. But the biggest issue we've got just now is risk assessments. It seems to be that the employers that are paying staff full pay for shielding are not classing it as a sickness absence, but as a kind of other absence. And this has not been captured in a return to work because it's not required without a sickness absence. So the whole risk assessment stage has been completely missed out. We have been kind of chipping away with the employer, so there tends to be some generic risk assessments that are going about, like one size fits all, which I've been having kind of weekly phone calls, sometimes 2 or 3 times weekly phone calls with the chief operating officer of the company to kind of chip away at that. They seem to be putting risk assessments out a lot for the people we support and forgetting about the staff. They're forgetting that the staff have families at home and they're putting people at risk by coming to work and putting themselves at risk. So we've been kind of chipping away at that and managing to get the company to look at individual cases with individual risk assessments. So it's taken a while, but we're managing to kind of get through quite a lot of the staff, but it's a very, very, very busy time just now. Some of the must-haves we have to have just now is obviously the PPE, and thankfully the Scottish Government are kind of supplying quite a lot of that when the companies are running low. And as I said, risk assessments, the company seems to believe that one size fits all, and the specific risk assessments are just completely missing. And when raising that with the company, they just seem to think the generic one will fit all and just change the name in it. So we're really, really struggling with that just now. We've been struggling. We've went through all the channels. We've went through managers, HR, up to the directors and CEOs, and getting nowhere. So we have kind of sought legal advice through the regional organiser of Unison to see where we stand on that, and we're just waiting on some advice coming back because we don't feel that the company's protecting the staff the way they should be. And that's just now. We're not even talking about offices opening back up and staff having to go back to work. We're just starting to kind of open those conversations and what that would mean for people at the workplace. And I think that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frances. That was really helpful and really insightful. Before we hand back to Shelly, I'm just going to just bring something up that's been mentioned in the chat. Quite a lot of people are saying that they can hear a bit of an echo. If you've opened the transcript page, the live captions, make sure you close this one down, otherwise you will get an echo. But hopefully you've been following the advice that's been posted in the chat and you've managed to solve that issue. So Frances Burns, Unison rep, thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to hand back to Shelly now, who is going to answer some of the questions that have been submitted by you guys, by the viewers. So over to you, Shelly.
Thanks, Frances. Thanks, Anna. So our top rated question comes in from Judith, who says, what can a person do if a company asks them to return to work, but the individual is a vulnerable or has a vulnerable person who they live with, or the individual does not feel it's safe to return to the workplace? And are individuals entitled to see the risk assessment the company have carried out? So there's kind of a few questions in there. Thanks also to Hassie, who's responded in there to say, yes, you do have a right to see the risk assessment. And actually, the government has recommended employers make assessments publicly available, so keep that in mind. What I would say is speak to your union rep about your specific situation. They should be consulted on the risk assessment to start with. There is NHS advice on living with someone vulnerable, particularly those who are in the shielded category, considered extremely vulnerable. A reasonable employer should support you by supporting you to work from home, or where that's not possible, limiting your duties so you're doing less work in contact with other people. But they only have to make changes if it's you that is the vulnerable person. If you feel it's not safe to attend the workplace, again, contact your union. If you have reason to believe you're in serious or imminent danger from exposure to coronavirus, the law is on your side to kind of remove yourself from the workplace and not be subject to detriment, and not being dismissed or receiving any other kind of pay docking or anything like that. But please get advice first. Another question is from Rachel, who asks what reps can do to support vulnerable colleagues who feel they're being forced back to work. Quite a few of these questions come in about vulnerable colleagues. Now, if you're not already aware of which of your members may be vulnerable for whatever reason, it could be worth the union branch doing a survey so you're informed as to how you can best support those members. Employers should be reminded that they have a duty to include vulnerabilities in their risk assessments, and that government guidance is to furlough any worker who's vulnerable and unable to work from home or be redeployed appropriately to a role where enhanced distancing can take place. If they're getting resistance, colleagues should be encouraged to seek a doctor's note to clarify their vulnerabilities, and with a recommendation from the clinician to avoid the workplace, just to make it absolutely clear that that is the requirement. Vulnerable workers can also request to be put on furlough. Obviously, the union will want to make a call for the furlough payment to be topped up, so nobody's financially worse off because they're vulnerable. And they should also be reminded that workers are protected by law against unfair treatment and dismissal if it's because of a pregnancy, if it's because of their age, or a health condition that's considered a disability under the Equality Act. And it could be unlawful discrimination on one of these grounds if the boss unreasonably tries to pressure someone to go to work or unreasonably discipline someone for not going to work. So some things to be mindful there if you've got vulnerable members and you're a rep trying to look out for them and negotiate with the bosses. Are we now going to hand over to our next speaker? I believe we've got Rob Maisey from the RMT, who works in transport. Obviously, transport is a major issue as people. Am I still on? As people start to return to the workplace, there's a lot of holes in the government's guidance in terms of telling people to go back to work, but then also telling them to avoid public transport. And obviously there's huge concerns for those people working in the public transport. So really good to be joined by RMT Workplace Rep Rob.
Hello. Hello, how's everyone doing? Not that I can see everyone else, it doesn't matter. Yeah, in transport we've got kind of a unique set of advantages and disadvantages. Like, to our advantage, we've got like a very well-established sort of trade union relationship with most of our employers, and there's lots of, and health and safety is an ongoing concern for the railway. So there's lots of systems in place for addressing health and safety concerns. And I can talk a little bit about the kind of things that we have as best practice anyway, in order to maintain like a good relationship of health and safety between staff and employer in this time and other times. We've also got some disadvantages, like the really incoherent position of the government affects us quite badly, because often our employers are waiting to hear what the government wants before implementing anything. And then if the government implements something which is practically difficult, it means there's a period of confusion while we try and work out how to do it. So, for example, we're expected to maintain social distancing on trains, which means running our trains at about 20% of capacity. But how do you manage a railway service where you're only running at 20%? Do you close off the station every 100 people? Do you prevent people getting onto the platform, onto the trains? So we're constantly having to make up systems as we go about how to manage the public health demands. Now, the company that I work for is a company called TfL Rail, which is part of the TfL group, which is actually very good. We have a weekly conference call with the reps and the management and the health and safety rep and the industrial reps. They put their proposals for how they want to manage the return to work. We say how we feel like it will impact on our members. We experiment and then we do feedback. So for us, that's the advantage of having a well-established machinery of negotiation. But of course, the disadvantage is you're constantly having to respond or be on the back foot to the changing circumstance and changing government advice. Just talking about on things that, for people that maybe don't have those advantages or are in a railway situation where there's a poor industrial relations environment and not quite such a good relationship between management and reps, it's insist that your company produces written guidelines about how it foresees managing the transition back to work. Just say, look, we're happy to work, we want to work, but we want to see how you plan to facilitate this safely. And then you can take those documents that they will inevitably have to produce, because you can ask for a description about how they want you to work. Any worker can say, I'd like you to describe to me in writing what you want me to do. And then you can scrutinise those plans. And if those plans have gaping holes, you can compare them to the government advice, you can compare them to NHS advice, and you can move forward from there. So I guess my one bit of advice, regardless of people's relationships with their employer, regardless of their trade union infrastructure, is ask for your employer's return to work framework in writing and scrutinise it that way. I could go on a little bit about different sections of the railway, or is there anything specific that I've missed? I can carry on going. It's kind of up to you.
No, that's really helpful, Rob. Thank you. Unless you wanted to add anything about enforcement within the railway, but if you feel you've already covered that, we can hand back to Shelley to answer some more questions from the audience.
Well, I mean, Shelly made some really good points about like the value of health and safety reps, right? And our health and safety reps are kind of our kind of first line, and we've got, as I said, we've got quite good systems in place because the railway is a lethal environment, even in normal times. The relationship between health and safety reps and management is usually one of cooperation. It's not usually as combative as a trade union relationship with their employer can be. Like the RMT is presented as this really militant, aggressive union, and there are sections of our approach which are quite militant or are quite aggressive. But when it comes to health and safety, the social partnership is actually already in place a lot of the time, because the rail companies don't want to be killing people, the staff don't want to be killing people, and the passengers don't want to get killed. And so in that respect, the health and safety reps play a really vital part already in the kind of machinery. And if there's a takeaway point from coronavirus and from this crisis for all other workplaces, it's the way that health and safety representation can be a really useful aspect of bringing the trade union right into the heart of your working relationship with your employer.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important point, Rob, about making health and safety the heart of union business. Thank you so much for your contribution. And we're going to hand back to Shelley now. Just to reference, a couple of people have asked in the chat about the recording. We'll be posting it on our YouTube channel later today, along with links to any resources that we've mentioned. So keep a lookout for that, and we will mail a link out to you as well if you've registered for this. So Shelley, back to you to answer a couple more questions that have come in from our viewers.
Yeah, sure. And if Rob's still on the line at the end of it, I'd be really interested to ask him a question about whether he's seen, in particular, more people joining the union as a result of what's happened recently, and whether he feels like they've got more confidence to kind of take action as a result of this. I know that's been the case in some unions where membership has gone up. And so the number of questions has more than doubled since we've been on the call, and there's no way I'm going to be able to get through all of them. But a lot of them are coming in about vulnerable workers. So I'll just take a couple more on that. A question from Kelly asks whether specific risk assessments are required for vulnerable workers. Now, the current rules are that if an employer becomes aware of an employee who has a health condition or another vulnerability, they might be pregnant, they should review existing risk assessments to make sure they cover any risks that might be present for that employee. It doesn't say there needs to be specific risk assessments for every single person, but that can reasonably be something that the union asks for. Andrew has a question about shielding. He says he's on the list and was due to return to work at Tesco on the 11th of June. Now, the truth is it's still unclear what is going to happen with regards to shielded workers. The government's plan released on Monday said it was now likely that the government will continue to advise people who are clinically extremely vulnerable to shield beyond June. But at the same time, the government seems to be briefing that it's coming up with plans to ease some of the strict measures required for those who are shielding. I'm on that list, Andrew, as well, so I appreciate your concerns. I share your concerns and confusion. I've got a really good question here from Laura, who asks, how can we use the fact that people who've been working from home and proving that it is possible to work from home to grant them reasonable adjustments when they might have been refused them in the past? So absolutely, I think there's an opportunity here for unions to demand better working from home policies, and in particular for those colleagues who require more flexibility because of disability or caring responsibilities or other reasons why they might choose to work from home, either part-time or full-time. Bosses have refused reasonable requests to work from home in many cases because they like us to be where they can see us, don't they? It's about that power relationship. But there are so many benefits for those where working from home is a possibility. The government has indicated this week that there could be new rights, they're calling them rights anyway, for workers with regards to requesting the right to work from home. But we need to push for those to be meaningful. It's actually, I believe, National Working From Home Day tomorrow, if you weren't aware that that was a dedicated day. And we've got something coming out on this about how we can kind of use that as an opportunity tomorrow. Back to Rob, if you're able to answer my question about whether you feel the union has recruited more members as a result of the crisis, and whether you think people have got more confidence to take action.
I think the trade union movement overall has definitely seen like an upsurge in its sort of a positive presentation in the media. Sort of, it's seen like people have seen the need for a trade union that maybe didn't see the need for a trade union in the past. Has the RMT been on a recruitment drive in this particular situation? Well, no, not really. We've got quite high density in our industry anyway. And for us, like, it tends to be in moments of conflict where we tend to go on recruitment drives because people want to vote in their strike ballots. So in this case, the kind of reps have sort of almost thrown off the militancy and gone to work on just keeping people safe regardless. And like, the hope is that as we emerge out of this, it will give people a different view on how the union functions, and it will strengthen our membership going forward. I mean, we're certainly not losing members, right? But I think at this point in time, it's more about just all hands to the tiller to keep the service operating, and that's very much like been our focus. I mean, as a union, we are always recruiting, and I would certainly say that if you're in an industry which doesn't have that traditional union strength, you should certainly be recruiting as many people as possible in order to back you up to make these sort of health and safety demands. But yeah, in this situation, I think what we're doing is more just demonstrating to our employer and to our members why we're so important in that moment of crisis.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rob. I believe we're now going to move to another workplace rep who it's great to be joined by. Another kind of sector that's been absolutely key in this government's move to get people back to work is the education sector. The government is trying to teachers have been working throughout the crisis anyway. A lot of schools are open to certain key workers, children and so on, but the government wants to extend that starting in June when we know it's not safe to do so. So it's great to have Jess with us, who's a workplace rep with the National Education Union, and is going to talk to us about how they're organising.
Thanks, Shelly. I think what the main thrust of what the NEU are trying to achieve at the moment is to keep as many of our members, as many of our children in our schools, and as many of their families safe as possible. And we have been really adamant since the announcement last Sunday that the best way to do that is to have a very high level campaign to stop the wider reopening of schools on the 1st of June. And, you know, that's something that is quite difficult for lots of teachers, because of course we really want to be back, but what's really clear is that the vast majority of NEU members feel very strongly that they want to be back really soon, but only if it's safe to do so. And we've surveyed all our members, and 92% of them do not feel that their school would be safe by the 1st of June. And I think it's pretty clear why people would feel like that when the union has asked 5 questions of the government to be met before we would say it was safe. They've asked for details about national testing and contact tracing. They've asked for there to be a much lower infection rate. They've asked for there to be a national social distancing plan in action, and protocols in place for what would happen if somebody was infected in a school, and whether that would mean it would close or whether just that class would close, and plans for protecting vulnerable staff members, vulnerable pupils and vulnerable family members. And so far the government have not been able to give any assurances of any of those 5 tests. So we're saying that it's not safe to work in any school in the country. And we're saying to our members that currently we want to look after the most vulnerable, we want to look after key worker children. We know that that is a hugely important thing, and it's something that we are very much wanting to do. But in terms of a wider reopening, we are not cooperating at the moment with any planning for an opening on the 1st of June, because we do want to make it very difficult for it to be a fait accompli. So on Sunday when Boris Johnson announced it, it was very conditional. It was, it would be at the earliest we could possibly do it. It would be, if certain things change, then we might be able to. And then by Monday, the DfE guidance had come out, and it was, we're all going ahead on the 1st. And the DfE guidance is really interesting because it says there's no mention in there of social distancing in schools. So it's obvious that the government want to have social distancing in the whole of the rest of society, but they're not going to have that in schools. And we're going to therefore be looking very carefully at how we advise members moving forwards. In the first instance, we want schools to say, really, it's not safe to open. And then we want to be advising members about steps that they can take to make sure they are safe, investigating legislation that exists to protect them, and all those other things, really. But we think we're getting it right as a union. We've seen massive growth in membership, so over 3,000 members. There was 1,700 that joined last Monday, and which is a huge amount. Normally on a normal Monday there would be a couple of hundred, so it was gone up by a huge amount. In Lambeth, where I'm from, we had a big members meeting last night on Zoom. There was 220 people that came along to it, which in a small borough is a lot. We've recruited 14 we're quite well unionised anyway across the borough, but we're finding reps in schools where we didn't have any, so we've got 14 new reps in the last week. We think there's very few now that don't have a rep in it. We've got a new COVID rep, a role as being a COVID rep in schools, and lots of volunteers coming forwards for that. We've always found it really difficult to recruit health and safety reps. We've had loads of volunteers and have put on national training for those already. We think we're in a good position to stop that wider reopening of schools. But just to say as well that we really think it's important that we are clear with parents and the wider community about the reasons why we don't believe it to be safe, and to be united with them in their campaigns and demands for decent pay, for the furlough scheme to be extended, and all of those kinds of things as well. So to make sure that it's not just the media aren't able to paint us as these sort of greedy teachers who just want to sit at home all day, which is not what we're doing. We're working quite hard at home. Is that all right?
Yeah. That's thank you so much, Jess. I don't know whether you've noticed in the chat panel, we've got a lot of people tuning in from the education sector, perhaps for obvious reasons. Lots of people saying they're from different schools, and we've had a couple of questions in the Ask a Question panel that are specifically about education. Are we okay just to put one or two of them to you before we hand back to Shelly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
sorry, my computer on my knees.
Yeah, so. No worries. No worries. So we've had there's been quite a few questions about education. So I'll try and make them, bring some of them together so that we're kind of answering more than one at once. Because of the maybe particular situation of a school with the children there, what particular measures might you be focusing on within a school environment to take account of the children factor, basically, and perhaps with infants where they're much less able to understand the idea of social distancing?
Yeah, I mean, this is the madness of the plan, isn't it? The youngest children they can't socially distance naturally, and even if they could, I don't think people have seen this stuff. There's a horrendous photograph that was doing the rounds on social media in France of children sitting in chalked out 2 metre square in the playground, really far apart from their friends. We don't believe it's not desirable to have social distancing. It's not right for little children, and actually that's why we shouldn't be going back until we don't have to socially distance in society anymore. And just practically to give people some ideas of what measures. I mean, I teach in year 3, but I did used to teach in early years, and children can't toilet themselves confidently and competently, and that's not, that's just the norm that you would have to be changing children's pants after they wet themselves and things like this. When they go to the toilet, they're not really able to or wipe themselves properly and these sorts of things, and their hand washing, their hands aren't developed in the way that older children's hands are developed for washing. Their coordination, they need a lot of help and support with those sorts of things. And if they were going to be washing their hands more regularly, I mean, I can imagine my reception class that I taught would have to pretty much be washing their hands all day under supervision before it would be time for them to start washing their hands again. So the practicalities of returning the smallest children is not practical, and it's not desirable either. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Obviously, it points out some of the problems with particularly the youngest children. And then there's another question here saying, are the education unions seeking coordination with or support from parents?
Yeah, absolutely. Where I am in Lambeth, there's parents that we've started to contact us, and we're looking at setting up some Zoom events to explain to parents groups about why we don't think it's safe to return. But also we know that actually most of our parents don't feel that it is safe either, and don't really want to send their children back into school where you've got an unsafe environment. So we do absolutely want to reach out and work with those.
That's great, Jess. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm gonna bring everyone back just in case Shelley's gonna got some more, possibly a couple more questions we can answer. There is one question that's been posted that I can answer, which is about health and safety when you're working from home and risk assessments when you're working from home. We have produced some special guidance for reps on that, which hopefully we can send round to you later today, or we can post it in the chat in a couple of minutes. We also did a webinar about health and safety and working from home, so please do look back in the archive and we'll get the link posted in the chat as well about that. So Shelley, just back to you in case there's another couple of questions that you wanted to answer, or maybe put a question to Rob or to Jess while we've still got them.
Yeah, absolutely. You beat me to it there on the risk assessment from working from home. We've got an online resource on that, so hopefully a colleague can share that now. So Michael asks, I am the only health and safety in my workplace, and I am currently shielding due to underlying health reasons. Am I being reasonable to insist my employer consults with me before any staff return to work? I feel this can be done by conference call. Yes, it is completely reasonable that you ask to be consulted, regardless of whether you're shielding or not. In fact, they have a legal duty to consult you as the health and safety rep, so don't take no for an answer. I see no reason why it can't be done by conference call as well, and if there's anyone else from the union perhaps who isn't shielding who can help, maybe by taking photos or videos of the situation at work that you can then use to make your assessments, and that could be really helpful. And something to consider for the future, and that's, to any health and safety rep who might be on the line, is that if you are the only health and safety rep in your workplace, see if there's anyone in the branch who's interested in becoming one. It's clear that we're going to need a much bigger army of reps. It's clear that these issues aren't going to go away anytime soon, and there's going to be a lot more work on your plate than there kind of was usually. So getting a few health and safety reps, setting up a committee if you can as well, a health and safety committee. If you've got union recognition, there's also legal duties on your employer to consult with a committee. There's training available, so do consider kind of encouraging people to help you out with that duty. Somebody also asked for us to share a link to the report that we produced a couple of weeks ago outlining the TUC's demands on kind of the tough health and safety measures that we want to see. So I am just sharing that in the chat box now. But I also wanted to ask Jess a question while she's still with us. It's really good to hear about how the union's building, recruiting more members, more reps, having a large attendance at meetings. And it's also really great to hear that you're confident that you're going to be able to resist the government's moves to expand the opening of schools come June. I'm interested to know what kind of action, if any, you're kind of expecting to have to use. I know of at least one branch of your union that's had to encourage members to refuse to attend the workplace because a deep clean didn't happen, despite the fact that they knew somebody who tested positive coronavirus had been on site. So what kind of action are you kind of expecting to see or have to use?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. The biggest action that we're asking people to take at the moment is to put the maximum amount of pressure on their management teams, on their governing bodies, on their local authorities, on their councils, as they possibly can. But we're obviously investigating things like Section 44, how people might individually use that. But again, it's like, you talked before about people taking advice before they do. But obviously the legislation does exist to protect workers from unsafe environments. And, obviously we as a union will be fully supportive of people whose workplaces are unsafe.
Thanks, Jess. And you mentioned Section 44 there. We've also been posting some links to a bit of an explainer that we wrote about what that is and what it means in practice. You do have the law on your side if you choose to not attend the workplace. If there's a kind of serious imminent threat to your safety, you can't be subject to detriment. But as Jess said, do consult your union, don't go it alone, strengthen numbers, and you want to make sure you've got the union's backing and advice and legal support behind you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Shelley and Jess. It's worth mentioning as well that I think it was Jess and Shelley have mentioned that we're going to need more safety reps than we've possibly ever needed before to deal with these situations. And don't forget, when you are a safety rep, there's always training available. You're not just sort of like sent out completely without any information or knowledge or skills, and people in the chat are discussing what some of the options are that are available for a union health and safety rep. The TUC has a health and safety stage 1, which is available in multiple different formats, but online, it used to be involved in a blended format or a face-to-face, but not at the moment. But yeah, please don't worry that you wouldn't have the knowledge or the skills, because we can train you to do that. Okay, we have been on the webinar for nearly 45 minutes. It has flown by, and we've had some fantastic presentations, information and tips shared. So before we round off, I'm just going to ask each person just to leave us with a closing message. I mean, unfortunately, I can't bring Frances back, but she did give us a fantastic presentation earlier. But any last words from you, Rob?
Yeah, just want to give my absolute support to Jess and the NEU. We're facing a really similar position they are, where we're being painted as this blockage to getting the economy back running. We're being painted almost immediately as this obstacle to like a sensible return to work. But we want to go back to work. We do. Our whole job is to keep the economy moving. It's the fact is that if we're put in a situation where it's totally contradictory, they want us to get moving and get working, but they also want us to maintain standards of safety, which include having very low passenger numbers, very large amounts of distance between people in busy choke points. Like, that's contradictory. You can't have a normal return to work and a safe return to work with social distancing and limited passenger numbers. And that's a contradiction the government have created, and that we're going to get, and we are already being blamed for, and the teachers are already being blamed for. The situation on the railway is changing all the time, and each section of the industry has got really unique challenges. But I believe that our General Secretary, Mick Cash, is on question time this evening. So if you want to hear a little bit more about what the kind of up to the minute situation from our point of view is, you can tune into that. But yeah, just my absolute solidarity with the teachers and the education unions for being in an equally kind of impossible situation between a totally disorientated government and an almost impossible health and safety task.
Thank you, Rob. Any last words, Jess?
Yeah, thank you, Rob, and solidarity to you and your members as well. And I think what's really clear is we can't trust this government to keep us safe, and therefore we need unions more than we've ever needed them in our lives, in the lives of anybody that we know. Actually, I think at the moment we're the guardians of all that is good, actually, in society, and we are the ones that place a value on human life instead of just the pure needs of profit. And we should be proud of that, and we should shout that from the rooftops. We're protecting people, and the government is sending them into harm's way.
Absolutely, and very well said, Jess. Shelly?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Rob said. Solidarity with both of you and with all your members. You're not only having to keep your own members safe in what is particularly dangerous work, but also the rest of the public. Education and transport affects all of us. And echoing what Jess said as well, that our health and safety reps in particular are the guardians, they're the lifesavers, and they're going to counter any danger that the government's sending workers into. Anyone out there, please just take advantage of what is already out there, the TUC training, any advice and guidance that we've produced, but also that your unions have produced. Take advantage of the rights that you already have, and they are there, and the resources of your union. And please just act collectively, strength in numbers, and solidarity to you all.
Thanks, Shelley. So all that remains for me to say is thank you all so much for tuning in. You've been fantastic. And to tell you about our webinar for next week, we get a lot of questions, both on the webinars that we do about health and safety, but about employment rights. Totally understandably, at the moment, lots of people have got questions about their rights in different situations. So that's why next week we've got a leading employment rights lawyer who will be here to answer your questions and to give you updates on the situation as it stands in this very unusual and extraordinary situation we're in. So thank you again, everybody, and do stay safe, and we will see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.